Hey y'all, I'm back with the woman of the Bible, and this one is the mother of Moses. So it's two of them, Jochebed and Pharaoh's daughter. So we're gonna start with Jochebed, but they together. Her character, her fierce love for her son, coupled with her faith, enabled her to act heroically in the midst of great oppression. Her sorrow to live in bondage as a slave. Her joy that God not only preserved the son she surrendered to him, but that he restored her child to her. Pharaoh's daughter. Her character. The Jewish people honor men and women whom they designate as righteous Gentiles. These are people who though non-believers, had assisted God people in some significant way. Surely Pharaoh's daughter should top the list of righteous Gentiles, courageously and compassionately delivering a child from death, a child who would one day act as Israel's leader, deliverer. Her sorrow that her adopted son, whom she had taken care of for 40 years, had to flee his home in Egypt in order to escape Pharaoh's wrath. Their story. 300 years after the death of the patriarch Joseph, a baby boy was born in Egypt. His lusty cries muffled by a woman's sobs. Jobed's heart was a tangle of joy and fear. This son had fingers forming a tiny fist against her breast, was so striking a child she hardly believed he was hers. Tenderly she raised a small hand to her mouth, pressing it warm to her lips. Her gesture calmed them both. She could feel the stiffness in her back dissolving, her muscles relaxing as she watched the night shadow evaporate in the morning lights. Slave though she was yet a Levite, a woman who belonged to the God of Abraham and Sarah, of Isaac, and Rebekah of Jacob. Rachel and Leah, she knew the stories. She believed the promises. God was faithful, having her people already grown up as numerous as the sand of the sea, just as he said they would. In fact, the Israelites were so numerous that the Pharaoh feared they might one day welcome an invading army and betray the nation from within. Over time, the Egypt had tightened their grip, finally enslaving the Israelites, until Pharaoh's paranoia produced an even greater evil. A command to murder each Hebrew male son, each Hebrew male child emerging from the womb. But the Hebrew midwives feared God more than the king and refused to follow his orders, excusing themselves by claiming that the Hebrew woman was stronger than Egypt woman, giving birth before the midwives even arrived. So Pharaoh commanded his soldiers to search out and smother every newborn male in the waters of the Nile. Jochebed could hear the screams of the mothers echoing regularly across the Hebrew camp as their children were torn from them. Her arms tightened around her own child as he slept quietly against her breast. This one, she vowed, will never be will never be fodder for the Egypt's river god. She and her husband, Amram, will pray they will plan, and they will trust God to help them. For 3 months, as long as she did, she hid the infant, managing to keep Miriam, 3-year-old, and Aaron quiet about their new baby brother. Finally, she acted on an idea that has been growing in her mind. Pharaoh had commanded her to consign her son to the Nile River. All right then, her own hands will put him into the water. Remembering how God had spared the child Isaac, she bent down, laid her son in a basket of papyrus, waterproof with tar and pitch. Then, with a whispered prayer and a last caress, she wiped her eyes, begging God to preserve her baby from the crocodiles that swarmed the river. She could not hear to watch as the child drifted away from her. Instead, young Miriam kept vigil, following at a distance to see what would become of him. Soon Pharaoh's daughter arrived at the riverbank with some of her attendants, spotting the basket among the reeds. She sent her slave girl to fetch it. As soon as she beheld the brown-eyed baby, she loved him. The river had brought her a child whom she would cherish as her own. She could not save all the innocent children, but she could spare one mother's son. When she was she surprised when a young slave girl Mary approached asking whether she could go after a Hebrew woman to nurse the baby for her. Did she suspect the truth when Jacob was a Joshua gathered the baby in her arms, this time as his nursemaid? Whatever was in her mind, she named the child Moses, saying, I drew him out the water. For the next 40 years, she educated him, a prince in the courts of Pharaoh himself. God kept Moses safe in the very midst of the extraordinary evil and danger. First in crocodile infested water, and then right under Pharaoh's nose. And he used the Egyptians to protect and educate him in ways that must have made Moses even more effective in his role as his people's deliverer. Year after year, Jochebed will surely have reflected on the marvelous faithfulness of God. Her ingenuous courage and faith should inspire even the most weak-needed among us. Two women, a slave and a prince, preserved the life of Israel's future deliverer, and so preserved the entire Jewish race. Their life and time, such an ordinary object, used to such extraordinary purpose. Imagine with what love and care Jochebed coated the basket with tar and pitch before placing her precious son within it. Few baskets throughout the century likely received as loving and careful a touch. Baskets were just one of the many types of vessels used to store and carry various items in the ancient world. In the home, women used baskets to store household items as well as fruit and bread. Brick makers carried their clay in baskets. Travelers used them to carry the supply they needed for their journey. Priests used baskets to store the bread and wafers that were part of worship in the turbinates. Typically made from some sort of plant material, leaves, twigs, or stalks. Baskets came in a variety of shapes and sizes. The smallest could be carried in one hand. Baskets just a bit larger were carried on the back or on the head and were often used to hold provisions on a trip. The disciples used 12 of these large baskets to gather up the leftovers at the feeding of the 5,000. Even larger baskets were used to let Paul escape out the window in the wall at Damascus. So it must have been quite large and sturdy. God's use of the ordinary to bring about the extraordinary is as much in evidence here in the early events of today as anywhere in Scripture. His tendency to bring about his will through ordinary items, ordinary people, and ordinary events in no less at work today than it was in back then. If you look for the signs of his presence, you are sure to discover them. And I will be back with another strong woman of the Bible. Bye now. Yeah.